It was just another chaotic morning in our household. The usual buzz of breakfast preparations and last-minute searches for missing shoes filled the air. I stood in the kitchen flipping pancakes while my wife handled the final touches for our daughter, Lily. At 9 years old, Lily was a whirlwind of energy and joy. Despite her cerebral palsy, which affected her muscle control and coordination, she had an infectious smile that could light up the room. I watched her struggle a bit with the delicate task of pulling on her school uniform. But she was determined, her bright eyes focused as she adjusted the buttons on her shirt. Her disability had never held her back in spirit, and over the years, I had become accustomed to her determination to do things on her own. Her school wasn't far from our house, just a few blocks away, but for the past 2 years, the school bus had been the vehicle that took her there every day. The bus ride had become a part of Lily's routine, one that she loved. Every morning, she'd wave goodbye to us with a big grin, her tiny wheelchair positioned just inside the bus door as the driver carefully maneuvered her into place. She always chatted with the other kids, exchanging stories of her day or simply enjoying the small adventures she had during the short trip. I had always been proud of how well she had adjusted, even though there were days when I knew it wasn't easy for her. Her mobility was limited, but her heart and mind soared in ways most people didn't realize. I often watched her with awe as she embraced life with a determination far greater than anyone I had ever known. That morning, however, was different. As usual, I helped her onto the bus, ensuring she was comfortably settled and secured. The bus driver, an older man named Mr. Thompson, greeted us with his usual warm smile. The moment I waved Lily off and watched the bus begin to move, something caught my eye. A figure stood near the bus door. A woman with blonde, tightly curled hair and a scowl that seemed permanently etched on her face. Mrs. Karen. She was a member of our neighborhood homeowners association, and everyone knew her. She was the type who felt the need to voice her opinion on just about everything. I had never had much personal interaction with her, but I had heard plenty of stories from the other neighbors. She was notorious for enforcing rules, her rules, and for trying to maintain a sense of control over everything. The way she carried herself made it clear that she believed she had the right to manage and dictate anyone's life who didn't follow her vision of how things should be. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was probably just asking Mr. Thompson about something trivial like the schedule or route for the bus. But as the bus slowly pulled away from our house, I noticed it came to an abrupt halt. The door swung open, and I could see Mrs. Karen speaking with Mr. Thompson, though I couldn't hear what they were saying. I squinted, trying to make sense of the situation. I saw Lily's face through the window. It was hard to see from this distance, but something was definitely wrong. Her small brow was furrowed in confusion, and she looked to the side at the two adults, unsure of what was happening. My stomach tightened. I knew Lily well enough to recognize when something was bothering her, and it was clear she was perplexed. Without thinking, I rushed out of the house, slipping on my shoes and heading toward the bus. As I stepped out onto the porch, I watched Mrs. Karen standing near the bus door, her hands on her hips in that all-too-familiar posture. I could see Mr. Thompson looking unsure, but he didn't say anything as Karen continued to talk to him, pointing at Lily as if she was some sort of inconvenience. I was halfway to the bus when I saw it, Lily being gently assisted off the bus by Mr. Thompson. My heart sank and adrenaline surged through me. "Lily?" I called, my voice tight with panic. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw me approaching. "Dad?" she asked, her voice trembling. She was clearly upset, but she couldn't fully express her confusion. It broke my heart. "Lily, what's going on?" I asked, turning to look at Mrs. Karen. Before I could get an answer, she spoke up, her voice as cold as ever. "Your daughter's a disturbance to the other kids," Karen said with a condescending tone, barely looking in my direction. "She can't ride the bus anymore." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I felt my pulse quicken, and my vision blurred for a moment. A disturbance? My heart raced as I tried to process what I had just heard. Was she seriously telling me that my disabled daughter couldn't ride the bus because she was a disturbance? It didn't make sense. My eyes narrowed and my voice rose in anger, though I tried to keep it measured. What are you talking about? She's not a disturbance. She's just like any other kid. She deserves to be treated with respect. Karen raised her eyebrows and let out a dismissive laugh. You should really keep her at home if she's causing trouble for the other children. The bus is no place for people like her. I was in shock. I couldn't believe my ears. The audacity. She had the nerve to refer to my daughter like that? I wanted to lash out, but I knew I had to stay calm for Lily's sake. I'll have you know, I don't appreciate you making decisions about my daughter's education or her transportation, I said firmly. She has every right to be on that bus just like the other kids. This is unacceptable, and I won't stand for it. But Karen didn't care. She turned on her heel, her arms crossed, clearly done with the conversation. It's not up for discussion, she said coldly. The decision has been made. She's not getting back on the bus. I stood there for a moment, feeling a mixture of disbelief and rage. My thoughts raced as I processed what had just happened. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not for a second. Not when it came to my daughter. I turned to Lily, my heart aching for her. She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. Dad, I don't understand, she whispered. I hugged her tightly, vowing right then and there that I would do whatever it took to fix this. No one, especially not someone like Karen, was going to push my daughter around. This was only the beginning. I wasn't going to let this slide. My heart was still pounding in my chest from the shock of what had happened earlier that morning. As a Navy SEAL, I had faced far worse than some neighborhood tyrant. But this hit home in a way I wasn't prepared for. This wasn't about a battlefield or a mission. It was about my daughter, my flesh and blood, being unjustly treated. I wheeled Lily back into the house, trying to keep my voice calm for her sake, but inside, a storm was brewing. We sat in the living room, the silence hanging heavy in the air. Lily's confusion mirrored my own as she clutched my hand, her small fingers tightly curled around mine, seeking comfort. She didn't understand what had happened, nor did I. The world outside felt far away as I made the phone call to the school. The school district had just wrapped up their morning assembly, and I had hoped they'd provide some clarity. But when I spoke with the school's transportation coordinator, it became clear that no one seemed to have a straight answer. The more I pressed, the more I realized that the school had no idea that Karen had interfered in the first place. They told me that Lily's transportation was supposed to be handled according to a specific set of rules and that there had been no reason for her to be removed from the bus. That was when I found out. Karen had taken matters into her own hands. She had made an arbitrary decision about my daughter's bus ride, convinced Mr. Thompson, the bus driver, to go along with it. They had just complied without thinking, without even considering the consequences. I couldn't believe it. I was furious, my hands shaking as I set down the phone. The nerve of her to act like she had the right to make decisions about my daughter's education, especially when it came to something as basic as transportation. She had no legal authority, no position of power over our family's choices. And yet, she had used her influence to restrict Lily's access to something as simple as a school bus ride. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an insult. I had to take action. I wasn't going to stand by and let this slide. The next day, I went to the HOA meeting. I had stayed out of the spotlight for most of my time in the neighborhood, preferring to keep to myself to avoid unnecessary conflicts. But this wasn't just any issue. It was personal. It was about my family, and I would not let this pass. When I arrived at the meeting, I could feel the eyes of the room on me. People were whispering, murmuring to one another. I didn't care. I had come for one reason, to confront Karen. She was sitting near the front of the room, her arms crossed, in a posture that screamed arrogance. Her smug face looked even more out of place in the formal setting of the HOA office, and I could see that she was enjoying the attention. She must have thought she was in control. Well, I wasn't going to let her think that for one more second. Took a seat in the back, but the moment I did, I could feel all eyes on me. It was as if the room was waiting for something to happen. A few minutes passed, and then, as it was my turn to speak, I stood up. My uniform as a Navy SEAL wasn't visible, but the years of training were all over me. I was composed, calm, and ready to make my case. But what was more important than anything else was the reason I was there. Lily. I cleared my throat, and as soon as I spoke, the room fell silent. Karen, I began, my voice steady, clear, and filled with quiet authority. You've made a mistake. I could see her straighten up, her smug expression faltering just a fraction. You have no right to decide who rides the bus and who doesn't, especially when it comes to my disabled daughter. What you did yesterday was wrong, and it won't stand. She opened her mouth to interrupt, but I wasn't having it. I had prepared myself for this moment, and I wasn't going to let her derail the conversation. You're not in charge here. You don't get to make decisions about my daughter's life, about her education, especially when it comes to her access to public services. The school district is in charge of that, not you. And you certainly don't have the authority to decide that she's not allowed to ride the bus. This isn't just about the rules. This is about basic human decency. You've crossed a line. I saw the flicker of discomfort in Karen's eyes, but she wasn't about to back down. She had always been a woman who prided herself on her power, no matter how misplaced. She leaned forward, trying to take control of the conversation. You're being unreasonable, she said, her voice dripping with feigned concern. The other children are being affected. My decision was made in their best interest. She looked around the room as though seeking validation. I shook my head, my voice cutting through her attempt at deflection. No, the only person you're concerned about is yourself, Karen. You didn't make this decision for the children. You made it because you think you have some right to control others. You don't. My daughter is not a disturbance. She's a child, and she deserves the same respect as any other child. And no one, not you, not anyone, has the right to take that away from her. Her face flushed with embarrassment, but she wasn't finished. I'm just trying to maintain order in the neighborhood. We all have to follow the rules. You don't get special treatment just because your daughter is disabled. I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I didn't. Let my frustration show. I knew better. Let's be clear, Karen, I said, emphasizing every word. This isn't about following rules. This is about empathy, about understanding. Your actions weren't about rules. They were about your own prejudice. You made an assumption about my daughter and acted on it without thinking. You didn't take the time to understand her needs or her rights. And now, you have to answer for that. The room was silent now. I could feel the weight of the moment. People were starting to look at Karen differently. She was no longer the self-assured figure she had once been. The other members of the HOA were beginning to see her for what she really was. Someone who thought she could control others because she could bully them into submission. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her posture slumped slightly, and she looked around the room, clearly realizing that her grip on the situation was slipping. She had underestimated me, and she had underestimated the people in this room. I won't back down, I said firmly. You're going to fix this. Lily is going to ride the bus again, and this whole situation will be addressed properly. If I have to go higher to get this resolved, I will. I stood tall, letting my words settle in the room. The HOA members exchanged glances, and after a few moments, one of them spoke up. We'll have to investigate this, but I agree with Mr. Hussein. We can't allow this kind of behavior in our community. Karen didn't speak after that. She had no response. She knew the game was up, and as I left the meeting, I knew I had done what I had come to do. Stand up for my daughter, for her rights, and for the principles that mattered. I was prepared to fight this fight for as long as it took, No one was going to take my daughter's dignity from her. Not Karen, not anyone. The HOA meeting the following evening was a far cry from the peaceful gatherings that usually filled the community center. The air was thick with tension, and as I entered the room, I could feel the eyes of the board members shift toward me. It was no surprise. After the scene I'd caused the previous day, they probably expected another round of conflict. However, this time, I wasn't just there to make noise. I was there to ensure that my daughter would be treated with the dignity and respect she deserved. As the meeting started, Karen was sitting front and center, her posture still stiff, her arms crossed as if she were expecting to be challenged. She knew what she had done was wrong, but she was too stubborn to admit it. She had dug her heels in, thinking that her position on the HOA board gave her the right to make decisions for others. What she didn't realize was that her actions had gone too far, and now she was going to have to face the consequences. The meeting began as usual with routine neighborhood business, but soon enough, the issue with Lily and the bus ride was brought to the table. As I stood up to present my case, I couldn't help but notice that there was a marked shift in the room's energy. There were fewer eyes on me now, fewer whispers. People were listening, really listening. I wasn't just another concerned parent. I was a father demanding justice for his child. And I knew that this was a fight I couldn't back down from. The conversation quickly escalated. Karen, with her usual air of superiority, tried to defend her actions, but it was clear from the outset that no one was buying her excuses. She began her defense with a rehearsed line about maintaining order and the supposed disruption caused by my daughter on the bus. She mentioned how Lily's disability was a challenge and how it made the bus ride uncomfortable for the other children. But the more she spoke, the more I realized she was simply trying to shift the blame, avoiding responsibility for her overstep. "You don't understand," Karen started, her voice tinged with frustration. "I made this decision with the best intentions. It's not easy for the other children to be around her. The rules are there for a reason, and I was only following them." I could feel my blood pressure rising. The nerve of this woman to claim that my daughter was somehow the cause of discomfort for other children. It was infuriating. But I held my ground, knowing that reacting emotionally wouldn't do me any good. I looked around the room and saw the other board members glancing at each other. A few murmured to themselves, clearly unconvinced by Karen's justification. "Karen, with all due respect," I began, keeping my voice calm but firm. "This isn't about rules or discomfort. It's about a person being treated with respect and dignity. You had no right to make the decision to bar my daughter from the bus, and you certainly didn't have the right to make that decision unilaterally." A murmur rippled through the room. People were starting to see it, starting to recognize the injustice of Karen's actions. Her face turned crimson, and for the first time she seemed to falter. She tried to push back, but the more she did, the more it became apparent that she had acted far outside her authority. One of the board members, Mr. Evans, who had been sitting quietly throughout the discussion, suddenly spoke up. "Karen, we need to be clear about something here. The rules you're referring to, the ones you claim were broken, are not meant to target children like Lily. There's no provision in our community guidelines that allows a member to arbitrarily decide who gets access to public transportation based on their personal opinions. You overstepped." Karen's face tightened, but she didn't respond immediately. It was clear that the support she had hoped to gain from the board was slipping away. As she sat there in silence, a few other board members nodded in agreement with Mr. Evans. It was becoming clear that they, too, saw her for what she was. Someone who had used her position to control others. Someone who had not only made a mistake but had tried to defend it at all costs. After what seemed like an eternity of heated exchanges, the board members finally reached a consensus. Lily would be allowed to ride the bus again, effective immediately. The decision was made, but it wasn't without consequence for Karen. The board agreed to launch a formal investigation into her actions. While the exact punishment or reprimand was still to be determined, it was clear that Karen's credibility within the HOA had been shattered. As the meeting wound down, I felt a sense of relief, but it wasn't the kind of relief that comes from simply winning a battle. It was a bittersweet victory. Yes, Lily would be allowed to ride the bus again, and that was the most important thing. But the fact that someone had tried to strip her of that basic right, someone who had no real authority to make that decision, left a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't just a violation of rules, it was a violation of trust, a direct attack on my family. But I wasn't finished. While Karen's immediate power had been curbed, I knew this wasn't just about getting Lily back on the bus. This was about making sure that no one else in the community would be subjected to the same kind of unjust behavior. This was about ensuring that the HOA understood its role, that it wasn't there to police people's lives and make decisions that went against basic human rights. I wasn't just standing up for Lily, I was standing up for every other family in the neighborhood who might find themselves in a similar situation, faced with someone like Karen who thought they could control others without consequence. The following days were a blur. The investigation into Karen's actions began, and I found myself fielding calls from the school district, the HOA, and even a few concerned neighbors who wanted to express their support. Word had spread quickly about what had happened, and I was amazed by how many people came forward to stand with me. Some had witnessed Karen's overbearing behavior in the past, while others were simply appalled by what she had done. It felt like a community coming together to push back against someone who had tried to impose their will on others. But through it all, my focus remained on Lily. She was confused by the entire situation, but she was starting to understand that she had the right to stand up for herself too. It was a lesson I had hoped she would never have to learn, but now that she had, I promised myself that I would always be there to protect her, to make sure she knew her worth. No one could ever take that away from her again. As I reflected on the ordeal, I realized that this wasn't just a victory for my family. It was a victory for every person who had ever been marginalized, overlooked, or silenced. In that HOA meeting, I had seen the power of standing up for what's right, of pushing back against an unjust system, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant it might seem. The decision to stand firm in the face of adversity had made all the difference, and while the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, I knew that I had taken the first step in ensuring that Lily, and everyone else, would never again face the kind of injustice that had tried to tear us apart. After the HOA's ruling, life gradually returned to its usual rhythm, though the events that had unfolded had left a permanent mark on all of us. Lily was back on the school bus, and as I watched her board each morning with her trademark smile, a sense of pride swelled in my chest. Despite the setbacks, the ordeal had not shaken her spirit. If anything, it had made her stronger. Every morning, I watched her greet the bus driver, Mr. Thompson, with a wave and a laugh, her resilience on full display. It felt like a small but important victory in a world that often seemed to forget about the children who didn't fit the mold of perfection. For Lily, life went on, and she was determined to face each day with the same courage she always had. But for me, things were different. The confrontation with Karen, the conflict that had played out in that HOA meeting, had opened my eyes to a reality I hadn't fully grasped before. It wasn't just about the rules or about standing up for my daughter's rights. It was about something deeper. It was about the realization that my role as a father held more weight than any title I had ever earned in the military. I was a Navy SEAL, yes, but being a father made me stronger than any combat mission I had ever faced. It wasn't a strength born of physical prowess, but of conviction, of the fierce determination to protect what was mine. I had stood up to a bully in the form of Karen, and I had made sure she knew I wouldn't back down, not when it came to my family. In the weeks that followed, I made sure to stay involved in the neighborhood. I attended the HOA meetings regularly, not because I was trying to assert myself, but because I wanted to ensure that my presence was known. I wasn't going to let someone like Karen take control again, and I wasn't going to let my family's rights be trampled by those who thought they could push people around. I wasn't a passive participant in my community. I was an active one, and I made sure to voice my concerns and advocate for what was right, whether it was about neighborhood issues or the well-being of families like mine. Karen, on the other hand, seemed to have retreated into the shadows. She no longer dominated the HOA meetings with her usual authority. I saw her less and less in the community, and when I did encounter her, her demeanor had changed. Gone was the smug confidence she had once worn like armor. Now she seemed subdued, almost apologetic, though she never said the words aloud. I had no illusions. Karen hadn't changed overnight, but she had learned an important lesson. Crossing a line with the wrong person had consequences. She had miscalculated when she decided to interfere with Lily's right to ride the bus, and the fallout from that decision had shaken her to the core. The power she thought she held had been stripped away in an instant, and though she didn't outright acknowledge it, I knew she would never forget the Navy SEAL who had stood up for his disabled daughter. It wasn't just Karen who had learned a lesson. I had too. The experience had taught me the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity, no matter the situation. I realized that sometimes the real battles weren't fought on the fields of war. They were fought at home, in the moments when you had to defend what mattered most. It wasn't about being a soldier, it was about being a father. And in that moment, being a father was all that mattered. Months passed, and the tension in the neighborhood slowly began to ease. The storm that had been brewing for so long had finally calmed, and life seemed to return to normal. There were no more whispers behind closed doors or stares when I walked down the street. People had seen how the situation had played out, and I could tell that the respect I had fought for had been earned. The neighborhood, for the most part, had rallied around us, recognizing that the fight I had waged wasn't just for my daughter, it was for all of them. It was a fight for decency, for respect, and for the understanding that no one, regardless of their circumstances, should ever be made to feel less than human. And then one day, something unexpected arrived in the mail. A letter from the HOA. It was a formal apology, though it came in the form of a professional, polished document, not a heartfelt one. The letter explained that Karen had been reprimanded for her actions, and that her conduct would be monitored moving forward. There was a mention of further disciplinary measures if she were to ever cross the line again, but the letter didn't matter much to me at that point. The real victory was the acknowledgement that what she had done was wrong. That, in itself, felt like a small triumph. Karen had been put in her place, not by force or anger, but by the quiet strength of standing up for what was right. And that was a lesson that she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The neighborhood, too, had become more supportive. People who had once whispered behind closed doors now spoke openly about the importance of standing up for each other. It was as if the entire community had been awakened to the idea that, while differences existed, the respect for one another's dignity was paramount. The support we received was overwhelming, and it made me realize just how much people appreciated the value of community. It wasn't just about living in the same area, it was about looking out for each other, about standing up when things weren't right. For Lily, life went on. There were no more interruptions, no more questions about whether she belonged or not. She was just another child, going to school and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. She had no idea of the battle I had fought for her, nor did I expect her to. She was free to live her life without worrying about the cruelty of others. That was all that mattered. As for Karen, I knew she would never forget what had happened. She would never forget the father who had stood up for his daughter. She would never forget the Navy SEAL who had stepped out of the shadows and fought for what was right. And as time passed, I was sure that she would understand that her attempt to control others had been an exercise in futility. Power, after all, doesn't come from authority. It comes from respect, from integrity, and from standing firm in the face of injustice. And in the end, it was that respect that had won the day. The experience had changed me, and it had changed our family. It had made us stronger, more united, and more determined to protect what mattered most. And as I looked at Lily, her smile brighter than ever, I knew that no matter what challenges we faced in the future, we would face them together, stronger than ever, with the unwavering conviction that no one could ever take away our dignity. If you've ever faced a situation like mine where the system seemed stacked against you or someone you love, then you know how crucial it is to stand up for what's right. Don't let anyone, no matter their title, strip you of your dignity. Stand your ground and know that you have the power to make a difference. If you want to hear more stories like this, where ordinary people fight back against injustice and how they triumph, make sure to subscribe to the HOA Stories. Stay informed, stay strong, and let's keep fighting for what's right together.